So, with just days left in their session before the holiday break that is upcoming, Democrats and Republicans in Congress are reportedly getting closer to a second coronavirus stimulus package, a relief bill, as they are often called. Finally, at the end of December, they are closer, but nothing is yet guaranteed. And I don't actually know what's worse, that it's taken 7 months to get close to a second deal, or what would actually be in this deal, which we've found out about over the last 24 to 48 hours, because this is a deal that will include ungodly amounts of money for many industries. And it might include $600 direct payments for some Americans. Now, the information is changing regularly. One estimate was it might be $900 for some Americans. 600 is the number that AOC and others are talking about. But the last estimate is it will be a $900 billion total package with the possibility of $600 in direct payments to Americans. And in the meantime, it would include that blanket liability shield for companies against coronavirus related lawsuits. That's something Donald Trump has been talking about after the first stimulus package. When discussion of the second one started, Donald Trump at every opportunity would say, we want the liability shield for companies. And understand what this is. A coronavirus liability shield for companies means that if there is an employee or a customer that gets the virus because of how your business handled social distancing and sanitary guidelines, et cetera, you have blanket protection from being sued for that. And it is essentially just an open door to companies to do whatever you can to increase profitability in the short run with no regard whatsoever to the danger that you may be placing your employees or customers or both in as a result of ignoring guidelines, which may make you more profitable. It's that would be in there, but they're battling for $600 payments for individuals. The package, again, as of the latest iteration that we've seen reporting on, it would not include any assistance to state and local governments, which is sort of where you need to start to properly manage the different ways in which this is affecting different municipalities and states. So it's just so pitiful and embarrassing and pathetic. There's really no other way to say it. I mean, $600. Some people received $1,200 back in May, plus those $600 a week boosts in unemployment for people who were laid off. It's been 7 months since that with nothing. Who knows, even if this is approved, and that's a question mark, how quickly the money would actually be distributed and make it into people's bank accounts. And they're talking about maybe $600. Democrats proposed doing another $1,200, and they've been proposing that since May. That went nowhere. Some of the more progressive Democrats, including friend of the show who we spoke to not that long ago, Congressman Ro Khanna, have proposed $2,000. Some have proposed $2,000 per month. That's all going nowhere very, very quickly. And the reality is, I never want to scoff at anything. When we know that half the country can't meet an unexpected $400 expense, you see the number 600 and you say, well, we shouldn't scoff at that. Okay. But the reality is that $600, if you're doing fine, doesn't change really anything. And if you've not been doing fine since May, then what's $600 going to do materially? I get it. Maybe this makes it so you can make half your rent payment next month, and that's better than nothing. But it's not about beggars can't be choosers. It's that the argument over whether we give $600 or $900 to people after 7 months of nothing, given the economic situation, communicates a complete lack of understanding as to what's actually going on in the United States for tens of millions of Americans right now. Even the first stimulus with the $1,200, it's fine and it was useful for people. But if you were employed at that time and you were continuing to work to earn a living, the $1,200 was not likely to affect your viability financially over the course of the entire pandemic. And that's why stopping short with that and then going 7 months with nothing is delusional. What really was the lifesaver for a lot of people back in April, May, was the enhanced unemployment of an extra $600 a week, which, by the way, in large cities, particularly if you have even just one child, it's barely enough to get by without working. And in some cities, it's not enough to get by. And look at how many businesses were closed at that time. So this is a great example of how being cheap is really expensive. And we've talked before. There was an interesting article I recommended. It must have been a year ago, maybe 10 months ago, about how being poor is really expensive. And the article explained, if you're poor, you're more likely to go to the bodega on the corner to get 4 rolls of toilet paper rather than ordering the 60 rolls from Amazon, which are better quality and cheaper on a per roll basis. But you've got to lay out some larger amount of money up front. And in that sense, it's much more expensive to be poor because you're often buying items at a higher unit cost, sometimes of lower quality, and spending more time acquiring those items because you're making multiple trips instead of you go on Amazon and you get the big box of toilet paper. It's an example. The way it applies here is it actually applies to a lot of consumer products. You buy the really cheap work boots this year, and you probably have to buy another pair next year and another pair next year. And that gets really expensive in the long run. Or you buy the really good boots with the lifetime warranty. You do have to spend more now, but your long-term cost is lower. The way it applies to stimulus is you do $1,200 in May and maybe $600 now. And it sounds like you're saving a lot of money relative to giving people $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month. Sounds like you're saving money. But when you consider that cash payments are demand side stimulus and they stimulate the economy, plus higher long-term payments allow people to stay home and be more responsible, which slows the spread. And we know that every person who ends up in the hospital with coronavirus places a huge financial cost on the system. You realize the higher outlay is cheaper in the long term by suppressing the spread. And case in point, you look at European countries that are only in their second spike now. That entire summer period in the Northern Hemisphere, where they had relatively normal summers, economically was much better than what we've had here, where we are now on our third peak. We had peak number 2 during the summer, and it was disastrous for business and the economy as we continued to hemorrhage jobs. So that's a long way of saying one of the richest countries in the world, which some love to say is the greatest country in the world, whatever that means, finds billions for corporations in certain industries, and we're arguing about $600 for people. It's pathetic. Canada did $2,000 a month for 7 months. If you were working but didn't earn very much, you qualified at least for part of that. Some provinces even did additional payments. So what Congresswoman AOC and some others are saying is if you don't find this $600 appropriate, get in touch now with your elected officials and tell them that. But really, more is needed. I mean, if this doesn't justify mass rallies at urban centers, I really don't know what does. Don't these members of Congress and senators work for us? And of course, that's true in theory. It's true on paper. In reality, they're mostly serving the interests of big corporations. How disconnected from reality do you have to be to think that $600 after 7 months of nothing is going to solve a problem and stimulate the economy? It's it's magical, delusional thinking. If you ever feel like you just don't have enough time to read all the books you want to read, you have to check out one of my favorite apps called Blinkist. Blinkist takes thousands of popular nonfiction books and distills each one down into an ebook or audiobook that you can get through in just 15 minutes, where you're getting all the key takeaways from the book. Just imagine how you'll be able to expand your horizons and knowledge by being able to soak up all of the important insights from 10 different books in an afternoon. Obviously, it's perfect for exposing yourself to a new book you otherwise wouldn't have time for, or you can use it to revisit a book you've already read, or use it to preview a book before you buy the full version and read it. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.